Segment 5. How cultures differ. When we enter another culture, we try to make sense of what we see and experience by comparing it to what we know or have experienced before. This can lead to overgeneralizing, stereotyping, or misinterpreting things. This is a normal way of coping. It is a starting point. It becomes a problem if we do not work to move beyond this point. Understanding how cultures differ will help you to look beyond the tip of the iceberg. When you cross cultures, you see that not everyone does things the way you do. This will even be true in the group you travel with. Whether we are aware of it or not, we often think our way is the right way. Have you ever visited a country where cars are driven on the left side of the road instead of the right, like we do here in the US? When talking about it later, we often say, they drive on the wrong side of the road. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong for them. But for us, it just doesn't feel right. The same will be true for different aspects of the culture you will visit. When visiting another culture, it's important to remember that there is no right or wrong way, just different. Cultures differ in many ways. The dimensions we will mention here are some key differences you may encounter in your experience. Most people are somewhere in the middle of the range we will present, but tend to identify more with one end over the other. And, as we mentioned before, each person is unique. Being familiar with these dimensions will give you something to observe for greater understanding. Dimension 1. Individualism versus group orientation. This dimension refers to what takes priority, an individual or the groups that people are part of. Individualistic orientated cultures are most concerned about the life of the individual. Decisions are based upon what the individual deems as best for his or her life. My behavior reflects on me, not on the group. In group-oriented cultures, people view themselves less autonomously and more as members of a group. They're concerned about the effects of actions upon the group as a whole, and decisions are made by consensus rather than individualistically. My identity is tied to the group, family, tribe, and my behavior reflects on the whole group. An example of this comes from Marco, a college student from Mexico studying in the US. During the class break, Marco bought a candy bar. When he returned to class, he passed it around to share with the other students. When it came back to Marco, no one had taken any. When he asked again if anyone wanted any, they responded, "We didn't take any because you got it for you." Marco's culture taught him that what he has is to be shared, while the other students did not take any out of respect for what belonged to Marco. Dimension 2. Hierarchy versus equality. This dimension refers to how much equality or inequality people within a particular society accept or expect. Some cultures emphasize the equality of all people and that every person has the power to change things. These cultures do have times when hierarchy is important, but for the most part, it's for convenience. For example, the boss is in charge, but often she or he consults with the rest of the staff. They might even call each other by their first names and socialize together. Some cultures emphasize hierarchy and formality. In these cultures, inequality is more easily accepted. Superiors are not seen as equal to subordinates, and those subordinates feel that they are in their rightful place. Titles and formalities are important. If someone has a title, status, or wealth, the people believe you or accept what you say or do because of your status. An example is a group from the US that visited Guatemala. The visitors had done research and believed that the local people should be using solar ovens. Since the group was from the United States, the local people believed they must be experts and agreed to build the ovens. It turns out, after the visitors went back to the US, none of the people actually used the ovens because they didn't like how the food tasted that was cooked in the ovens. Instead, they used the ovens for storage. Dimension 3. Uncertainty avoidance. This dimension measures the extent to which people within a culture tolerate risk and feel at ease with ambiguous circumstances or the unknown. In some cultures, people have little tolerance for the unknown. They focus on ways to reduce uncertainty and ambiguity, and they create structures to help ensure some measure of predictability. In these cultures, control is important. In other cultures, people are not as threatened by unknown situations and what lies ahead. They prefer open-ended instructions, varying ways of doing things, and loose deadlines. In these cultures, people accept that much of life is out of our control. In these cultures, you often hear some variation of the phrase, God willing, or if God wills it. An example comes from Louise, a missioner from the U.S. who served in Mexico. Louise went on a pilgrimage with a local family. The longer they walked, Louise kept asking, "How much longer?" Each time the response was, "Just over the hill." Eventually, Louise's friend said to her, "Why are you Americans so concerned with needing to know all the details? We will get there when we get there." Dimension 4. Relationship versus task orientation. In this dimension, the difference is whether the priority is placed on punctuality and efficiency or on people and relationships. Some cultures emphasize the importance of relationships. Efficiency and time do not take priority over the person. Nothing is more important than the person standing in front of you. These cultures are also spontaneous and flexible in their approach to life. Task-oriented cultures emphasize time, punctuality, and efficiency. It's not that people are not important. Being punctual and efficient is a sign of respect for the other person. These cultures are often structured in their approach to life. An example of this is Joe, a business consultant from the U.S. who served in Malawi. Joe was scheduled to meet a group of local leaders to discuss a project. The meeting started without the head of the committee. When he arrived, the meeting stopped. The man went around to greet each person, explaining that on his way he ran into his neighbor, who told him about his sick brother. When Joe told the story later, he shared that he thought the man should have told the neighbor that he couldn't talk because he was late for a meeting, and that instead of going around to greet everyone, he should have apologized for disrupting the meeting. Dimension 5. Direct versus indirect communication. This dimension refers to how cultures communicate ideas, feelings, and deal with conflict. In cultures that communicate directly, you can say what you think directly to somebody. Usually, a yes is a yes and a no is a no. There are no hidden meanings. Short and direct shows respect for the person's time, as well as professionalism. In cultures that communicate indirectly, the emphasis is on relationship. It's about being friendly and not offending or embarrassing the other. You often say what you think the other person wants you to hear because you don't want to offend them or you want to make them happy. You may need to use a third party to communicate information, especially if what you want to say is challenging or sensitive. An example is a church group from the U.S. who went to Haiti to help with a building project. Upon arrival, the group met with the local building committee. The leader of the group from the U.S. presented the list of supplies needed, and then a work schedule was agreed upon. Everyone was excited. Then the next day, when the work was about to begin, the supplies had not arrived, and only a few members of the local community had shown up. The group from the U.S. was upset and frustrated, since they only had 10 days to do their work. Sister Anne, a missionary from the U.S., explained to the group that the supplies probably wouldn't be delivered for a couple more days because of a problem with the supplier. The group asked why they weren't told this at the meeting the day before. She explained, "The people are so grateful that you've come all this way to help. They are so happy that you're here. They didn't want to disappoint you." These are just a few of the ways that cultures differ. There are some of the most common dimensions people question or struggle with when crossing cultures. It's important to recognize both ends of the spectrum have value, and neither way is right or wrong. Hopefully, Learning about these dimensions will guide your observations when you enter the culture you'll be visiting, as well as help you to make adjustments that may help you avoid potential problems. Small, large group sharing. Which of the dimensions mentioned do you think might be more challenging for you when you encounter someone from the opposite end of the spectrum? What have you observed about people who seem to be good at relating to different cultures?